Okay, here we are back for video number 2 on our giant worm diagram. We're going to start off with the digestive system. And once again, I like to color code things, so I'm going to color code my digestive system green. And then if you notice on the bottom in the corner, you've got a little spot for your color coding key. So I'm going to put a little smoochie of green and then put digestive, so that I know everything on my diagram that I color green is part of the digestive system. Okay, so we're going to start off with the mouth. As you might imagine, this is where the food enters. Okay, so food enters here. It is the beginning part of the digestive system. Okay, so on our diagram, and let's see if I can get the internal. So here's the internal, starting with the anterior end on here. It continues on where you can't see, but that's okay. All right, so for the most part, we're going to start with labeling our mouth at the anterior end. So yes, it was part of our external systems, but it also belongs as part of the digestive system as well. And then in our drawing, we're going to do 4 bumps and a tube. So that's pretty much going to look like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a tube, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and a tube. And this tube does continue all the way down to the posterior end. However, I'm just not going to take the time to draw it. Now keep in mind, as we draw our worm, we are looking at it from a side view. When we actually do our dissection, we are going to be doing the dissection top down. So if you think about, here's my friend the frog, okay, so we're looking at it right now from a side view. This is kind of in comparison to our picture. But when we actually do the dissection, we're going to be doing the dissection on the top, okay? Obviously, we're not dissecting a frog, but this is just to give you an idea. As we draw our picture, we're looking on the side. When we actually do the dissection, we'll be looking at it top down, okay? So there's our beginnings of our digestive system, starting with our mouth. Our next bump, our first bump, is what we're going to talk about, and that is the pharynx, okay? And as we go, I'll give you a couple of helpful hints as far as what stuff looks like. The pharynx is responsible for swallowing the food, okay? And your helpful hint, it looks kind of like a Q-tip, like the end of a Q-tip. It's fuzzy. It kind of has that same shape. All right, so that's my helpful dissection hint, that the pharynx, which is right here, looks a lot like a Q-tip. All right, so I'm going to label my pharynx. There's our pharynx, okay? So it's where after it enters the mouth, it starts being digested and swallowed right here in the pharynx, okay? Our next one is the esophagus, and hopefully that should sound familiar. You have an esophagus as well. Some pre-digestion gets done here. In other words, some enzymes start working on it, okay? You're going to find these underneath our aortic arches. And we'll talk about aortic arches in a few, all right? So they're kind of hard to see. This is where our pre-digestion happens. They are kind of hard to see because they are covered up, okay? So sometimes they are a little bit tricky to actually locate, okay? So here's our esophagus. So there's our esophagus, all right? The next two kind of work in tandem, the next 2 bumps that we're going to talk about. So we've got the crop and the gizzard. And helpful hints here, the crop is for food storage, okay? And when you touch it, it's going to be squishy, all right? So when you touch it with your finger or a probe, you'll actually notice it has some give. It's mushy. It kind of looks like a shriveled up pea, all right? So it's kind of mushy. And the next one is the gizzard, and G for gizzard, G for grinds. So the gizzard is responsible for grinding food, okay? And it is hard. In other words, when you touch it with your finger, it's going to be hard like a rock, all right? It will not move. It will not squish, all right? So on our diagram, the first bump that we talked about was our crop, and the second one that we talked about was our gizzard. That's an R, sorry. All right. And then our tube, which you can see I stopped drawing, it does continue, like I said, all the way down to the exiting at the anus at the other end, but for our purposes, just know that it continues. This is indeed the intestine, which is the last thing in the digestive system, at least that we're going to focus on right now. All right, so nutrients are absorbed here. This is the tube. Like I said, it does continue on all the way. Okay, so nutrients are absorbed here. And as you can imagine, it is a very long tube that extends all the way to the other end. Okay? And that's going to end our digestive system.